and welcome back to our pet parent education segment. This week we are doing curly coated dogs. Again, so sorry if I am looking down. We have our baby monitor there and my lovely notes. Just to make sure, again, like I'm not rambling because I don't want to do that. But yes, so just like our last coat type video on double coated dogs, we'll be going through everything to know, especially grooming wise, about curly coated dogs. I was also originally going to do this at my work with little Rulin, our little puppy, and we do have a segment already filmed of me demoing some skills on her, especially brushing. Really, only as brushing. That's the big thing with these dogs. But she was very, very anxious on the table, and she's still learning some table manners. Obviously, she's a 5-month-old puppy, so she's definitely still learning. So just for her safety and to keep her a little more calm, we're doing the majority of the filming here, and then we're doing the demo skills I already filmed with her a couple days ago. So we will splice those in when the time comes. All right, so first of all, what or who are our curly coated dog breeds? Now, the purebreds are going to be your poodles. That's kind of the most well-known. The Bichon Frises, they have the really super round faces. They were made for, they weren't originally made for this, but they ended up being like circus dogs. So they have a really funny haircut as their breed standard, but really cool to execute when it's done correctly. Portuguese water dogs is another well-known one. And then some others are I'm going to butcher this name, the Legato Romagnola. That is the dog that hunts truffles or can sniff truffles. It is Italian, that's why I butchered the name. Another really fun one is the Bedlington Terrier. Has like one of the coolest haircuts of all time for breed standard. Really awesome. And then other ones are the Spanish Water Dog and the Irish Water Spaniel. Again, they just have these fluffy, soft, really dense, curly coats. But when they're like blown out, they do poof really beautifully, and you can do a lot of super fun haircuts on these dogs. Doodles typically fall into this category. We will talk a little bit more about doodles later and some of the different challenges that just comes with the breed, or the mixed breed, I guess. They're not a purebred. But anyways, so now that we know who we're talking about or which dogs we were talking about, we can go into the most common issue, which I can put some photos up here. I think I actually only have one right now. But the most common issue we see with these dogs in grooming is matting. And that is because of the curly coat, the nature of it. It knots like none other. And it is also because it is like a very more like kind of soft textured coat. It just wants to knot up really, really easily. I mean, you can ask my sister who has curly hair. Her hair does knot very easily. She has to constantly keep different products in it and brush it, whether that's usually it's just finger combing to, keep the beautifulness of her curls. But her hair as a human gets very knotted and she has curly hair. It's the exact same with these dogs, especially in the high friction areas, which is around behind the ears and kind of the neck area, especially the neck area if they are constantly wearing a collar. You do want to kind of stay away from the nylon collars. That's typically the ones you'll find being sold at your typical pet stores. And you do want to go for more of a rolled leather, or sometimes even the neoprene. There's a lot of the new neoprene, like biothane, collars. Those ones I've seen some success with as well. But you just want something that's a little more slippery and won't like rub essentially their fur as they are moving around. Other areas that they mat are armpits. We love that, but that is a place that I do have to shave very frequently. Luckily though, that is a very easy to hide spot. Other areas is obviously the butt and the tail. The tail gets matted all the time. A lot of dogs, they don't like their tails being touched, but that is a spot that we do need to brush. And if your dog does struggle with brushing, always offer treats and try to get that positive reinforcement and positive association going with brushing. And just make it a part of their daily routine. That's the easiest way to get it like successful and to get them used to it. Other areas too are the feet, specifically between the toes. A good portion of these dogs, specifically our most common one, which is poodles, they have webbed feet because they were made to be water dogs. Poodles originally are water retrievers or were water retrievers. And so they do have those webbed feet to help them swim. But fur grows in between those toes, and so that is a very common spot where they get matted. And yeah, just all down essentially the back leg, and sometimes even the front legs if they're really bad. And then if they are laying down a lot, the stomach area is another area where they can get very matted. So basically the entire dog but the back. And that is just due to, again, the nature of this dog's coat. While it is absolutely beautiful when it is groomed properly, it can also be, it is the most difficult dog coat to maintain well long. And that is just because of the nature of this dog's coat. And so that is the most common issue, is matting. Typically, we don't see really any other issues with these types of dogs and this coat in general, unlike our double coated where we saw also compaction as another major issue. Okay, so we can move on now to, I think, the best part about these dogs is there are so many different haircuts you can do on them, from the very, very popular teddy bear cut, which everyone wants on, especially their doodles. And yes, you can still get a poodle and make it look like a doodle, even though a doodle is part poodle, by giving it a teddy bear haircut. I have done this on a lot of poodles, actually, as their pet parents wanted a better behaved dog, but still wanted them to look like a cute fluffy teddy bear. It's actually easier to do the teddy bear cut on a poodle, just because their hair is that proper texture. Other fun haircuts we can do are like Asian fusion, and that one is one I recommend a lot to pet parents, especially ones that are struggling with matting. This one, as the name suggests, it was made big in Asia. They have a lot of little kind of like miniature poodles and some doodles, and even some Bichons, just like those fluffier curly coated dogs, that they love to dress up in clothes. And because the clothes covers, the stomach and the back and kind of the tops of the arms, they needed a way to prevent matting because of the friction between the clothes and the coat of the dog was a disaster and made the dogs matted. So essentially what ended up happening is these groomers started taking the whole body short, so that is the back, the sides, and the stomach, and then kind of like the tops of the shoulders and the legs. And then they made the legs more triangular. They're very beautiful when well done. And it's really fun to watch videos of, there's some really good like Korean groomers that are on Instagram, and they are amazing at what they do. Really cool to watch them do it with their giant long straight shears. But they essentially make either column legs, but the more common one is triangular legs, really fluffy and pretty, and it blends really well into the shorter coat on the back of the dog. And then they do what a lot of groomers here in the States call a mushroom head, which is where they take the chin shorter. It's a oval muzzle, which sounds weird, but it looks really good with the rest of the cut. And then it's a big poofy like top knot type thing, similar to a teddy bear face where it's a really big fluffy top of the head. And then the ears, you can do whatever you want. You can make them blend into the head. You can make them the poodle kind of like more bell type looking ears, or you can do like little palms essentially. I have a Bichon that has little palms we do on his ears, or we make his ears into, they look like little Princess Leia buns almost. Really fun. But that is another haircut, and that's one that I frequently recommend to pet parents who are experiencing matting. Another one is a lamb cut. Lamb cuts are typically done on like Yorkies and Shih Tzus that want a more longer, flowier leg. Again, very similar to the Asian fusion look, but the legs are brought up further on the body. And so it does give the illusion still of like really long, flowy legs, which is awesome. And you can do that on poodles and doodles as well that are experiencing matting issues. It just gives the pet parents and you guys less to brush at home, which is always a plus. So that's another haircut you can do, and that one you can do with a teddy bear face as well. You can also do a teddy bear face on an Asian fusion body. You can mix and match whatever your preference is. Yeah, you can also, you can do dreadlocks on these dogs. I've seen some really cool poodles with, instead of like a flowy top knot, they've done like dreadlocks up there, and then they take the ears a little bit shorter. Those ones look really cool. Yeah, and then there is creative grooming, which if you have not looked up creative grooming, it is incredible what these groomers and artists can do. Yeah, they can sculpt like people and like animals and all these things into the coat of the dog, and then they dye it and do detail work. It's really amazing. But yeah, so with these dogs, really the possibilities are endless. There are though the breed standard cuts that most people do think about with these dogs. The poodle, most people think about the continental, which is the one with the funny pom-poms on the hips. Like I said, these dogs were originally water retrieving dogs, and that haircut was the haircut that the owners would give their working dog. And the reason is they didn't want the water weighing down the dog, and so they did shave a good chunk of the dog, but they wanted their joints to be protected in the cold water and their internal organs. So the big, floofy top knot and the jacket is what they call it, that covers their chest, that protects their like heart and lungs and internal organs. And then their shoulders, obviously. The palms and the bracelets protect their ankle and feet joints, and their hock on the backside joints. And then the rosettes, or the palms that are on the kind of butt area, the hips, it protects their hips and their kidneys. So really, really cool that that cut actually has like major importance. Obviously, they probably didn't keep it as floofy. If you do look up old-time photos of poodles, they are a little more, they're not as floofy as they are today in like show dogs, but they still keep the overall silhouette of the dog true to form. But yeah, so that's what those dogs originally were bred to do, but there are so many other cuts you can do on that dog. The Bichon, like I said, they became a little circus dog essentially. Super cute though, and they do have that really funny, goofy personality if you own one. But they do have their breed standard cut is like a very circular round face, because people thought it was funny if you couldn't see their ears, I guess. And so the ears are blended into their giant round face. Yeah, and then they have a very sculpted body. It does look very beautiful when well done. But again, you can do a lamb cut on a Bichon and it would look beautiful with a teddy bear face. I typically do one length all over with a teddy bear face on these dogs. And then the Lagotto, the Spanish and Irish water retrievers or spaniels, those dogs, typically their breed standard is to leave them curly. And the Irish Spaniel, if I remember right, they shave the tail, so they have a rat tail. But again, if you have one of those dogs, you can do whatever you want on it. Same with Portuguese water dog. They have kind of like the poodle, except for it's cut closer to the skin. They have like a jacketed area, and then the back half of them, past their rib cage, is taken very close to the skin and almost shaved down. Looks kind of funny if you see it and you don't know what's going on. But same reason for the poodle. That kind of fluffier jacket is meant to protect like certain organs and areas of the dog from the cold water. And then Bedlington Terriers, they have the best breed standard cut with their really funny, they have like on their nose and their muzzle. I'll put photos of all of these over here as I'm talking about them. But they have like one of the coolest breed standard cuts, at least in my opinion. hardly anybody has Bedlingtons these days anymore. And then when you do get one and they get a breed standard cut, it is awesome. My salon manager and one of the people that really trained me and made me into the groomer I am today, she had a client that was a Bedlington that got the breed standard cut, and she did phenomenal on him. So yeah, really fun to do that. Okay, so those are just some of the haircuts you can do on these dogs. But yeah, the possibility, like I said, is endless. You can leave them a little bit more curly as long as, they're not getting all knotted and matted and properly, bathed and groomed on time. Or you can fluff them out like we do with most poodles and Bichons, and you can sculpt their fur really however you want. Okay, now that we've gone through some of those fun haircuts, let's talk about doodles and some of the differences between doodles and a purebred dog. So doodles are a mix, and I do know that there's like a group of doodle owners that are trying to get doodles into, or to be recognized as like an official AKC breed. That is very difficult though, because doodles represent any breed mixed with a poodle, and so the possibilities of however many you see are endless. I, to this day, have seen almost every single type of doodle that you could possibly imagine. Obviously, the most common are golden doodles, labradoodles, cockapoos, bernedoodles, and like Aussie doodles or sheepadoos are another very common one. But I have also seen Alaskan Malamute poodles mixes. The worst hair, I'm so sorry, the worst hair on planet Earth. I have seen English Springer Spaniel doodles. And I've seen some Saint Bernard poodles as well. I did, on my PetSmart schedule, someone did book a spot for a Irish Wolfhound doodle, but then they canceled, and I was kind of bummed because I wanted to see how big and like how terrible the dog's fur was gonna be, because that would have been a nightmare. So anyways, one of the reasons that doodles are harder to groom than, say, your purebred poodle is their hair texture. Their hair texture is different because you are taking typically a dog that is a double-coated dog, golden retrievers, Labradors, Cocker Spaniels, Bernese Mountain Dogs, and you are breeding it with a poodle who has essentially a single coat that is just really curly and fluffy. And when you mix those two, they still hold qualities of both types of furs. So you do have, most doodles do shed. It's just not as much as their parent dog, essentially. Their parent double-coated dog. Some of the better, like, hair textured ones are going to be like your Shih Tzu doodles, although we don't see a ton of those, and then your Yorkie doodles, because those ones have silky hair, and so the hair textures are fairly similar. Hello, will you lay down? Lay down. All the way down, baby. Yeah, or go play with your sister, that works too. So that is why it is, and the reason why it might not seem, unless like you understand hair types and how they cut and how they lay on a dog, it might seem like, you're just tossing coins, or you're looking for something to pick at. But a double coat, if you shave it with clippers, and even if you scissor, it cuts differently than the fluffy poodle coat does. So, and like some of the things that can happen is if you're not clippering correctly, or like your, your like pressure is slightly off, when you're clippering, it can leave lines in the coat, and you have to go back and blend those. And that is if it's more on the double coated side. And that is the thing with doodles too. You don't really know which coat type you're gonna get. Some of them do look and feel more like a poodle coat, and some of them are more double coated, like they're in like kind of, it's not wiry, but it is like more of a double coated kind of harsher texture where it lays flat on the dog. Kind of that type of texture. And so it's really hard when you're picking out a puppy. If you get that opportunity, some of them, you just pay and they give you a puppy. But it's very hard to tell which type you're going to get when they are a puppy because they do shed their puppy coat and it becomes an adult coat later on. Hey, lay down. Right now. Baby. Thank you. Good job. No, stay there. Lay down. Thank you. Stay. So that is one of the biggest challenges, is especially too because a lot of people will find a teddy bear cut and it's been done on a poodle. Well, they'll find a photo of it and it's been done on a poodle and they'll bring that to their groomer and say, I want my doodle to look like this. And it just isn't possible because of the coat texture. A lot of doodles around their muzzle especially, it will lay flatter. And that is, again, just because of the coat texture. They do have kind of more of that, most of them have a lot more of that kind of flatter, almost like overcoat type feel to it. And because of that, you can't cut it the same way as you would something that poofs out and fluffs out beautifully. And that's not to say doodles aren't beautiful. You can make them beautiful. Just know that they might look different than the photo that you bring in. And usually I'll tell people this. I'll say, hey, I will do my best and I will do a teddy bear face. It will just look a little bit different. And good groomers will tell you that. The most common issue again with doodles is matting. And this is more so even than with our doodles and our Bichons and the purebreds. And again, that is because you have generally kind of a harsher, almost it's not technically an overcoat or an outer coat. But you do have kind of that harsher texture mixed with a fluffier, like almost undercoat. Again, it's not 1-for-1 because it is a mix. But that is kind of what it is. And so as there is a little bit of shedding and there's all that friction between the two, it does mat very, very easily. A lot of doodles too are very extremely sensitive, and I don't know what it is, but they are so sensitive with their front legs and paws. Their back legs are usually fine with, but for some reason, their front legs and paws are so sensitive. And I do not see this on like most poodles, like purebred poodles, but on almost every single doodle, they have very sensitive front paws, and it's weird, and I don't know what it is. But that is an issue, and so if your dog has extremely sensitive front legs and paws and is biting, and other, restraining methods aren't working, and aren't safe, then that might be a case where you either have to pay extra for hand scissoring if your dog allows that, or you'll have a half-finished dog that won't be very fun. So we do want to desensitize those areas if you do have a doodle. Another thing that I see very commonly with doodles is they get food stuck in their mustache area. And you might think that would just rinse out in the tub, but what happens is it gets stuck and then it mats. And so you have to cut that out. It cannot be brushed or combed out in general. And in general, it also doesn't just wash out in the tub. So that is another area you would want to pay particular attention to when brushing your doodle, especially if you want a full teddy bear face. Let's see, I think those are all the common issues with doodles. Doodles in general too, they're just not as well behaved as poodles. And again, that's because you're taking two working class dogs and you're mixing them together. And generally these dogs are then used as companion dogs because they're cute and they're fluffy and whatever. And I put a lot of the responsibility on the breeders that do this, because their job, right, is to sell the dog. And so they come to their client, which is pet parents, and they say, I have this fantastic dog. It basically doesn't need any training. It basically doesn't need any socialization. And you don't have to groom it, which is the biggest lie, because doodles are probably the dog that requires the most grooming besides the purebred poodle. And then they just come out a fantastic dog. You hardly have to exercise them because they're a companion dog. And so then the pet parent that's listening to the breeder that's supposed to have this expertise and knowledge, um, they think that their dog is just perfect and doesn't need work, which is not the case. All dogs need work, even the glorious purebred poodle, and the border collie, which is the smartest dog, or at least it has been tested and crowned the smartest dog. That dog still needs work. It usually, the smarter your dog is, they do need a lot of exercise and mental stimulation, because if they don't get that, it's like a toddler. They're gonna go destroy your house, or they're gonna chew a hole in your wall or in your couch. So you do need, a lot of mental stimulation and exercise to keep these dogs healthy and in shape and not destructive or aggressive. Um, so that's my little tidbit on doodles. They can be great dogs. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law have one as their little pet, and it is awesome. She is so cute, and she's such a good companion to them. But they do put in the work. They exercise, they train, and then they do a groom that works with their dog. I do think that leads perfectly into our next little category. Is the having a good grooming routine. With these dogs, purebreds and with doodles, it is so important that you have a good grooming routine. Now, you do want to talk with your groomer about this, because if you cannot brush your dog like at least twice a week at home, your curly coated dog twice a week at home, you need to get a shorter haircut on it. And the reason is because it will mat anyways if you don't brush it and you have a longer one, and then they'll have to shave it anyways. So if you get a slightly shorter cut, so say a 5 or a half inch, those are my two favorites for my pet parents that struggle a little more with brushing, then your dog can still, they might look a little shorter when you bring them home at first, but they will grow within that, 4 to 8 week time frame. They will grow out and they will look fluffy right before you bring them back. I have a client, Woody, that I actually recently just did. I can put his picture up here. He generally comes in and is like an inch to an inch and a half. He gets a half inch and we, kind of shave him down. He still looks pretty fluffy because we do blow his coat out, and it looks nice and fluffy, and we give him a really fluffy face. But by the time he is due to come back, he already has a ton of coat. And luckily his coat does not mat super easily. He has more of that wiry, kind of like more poodle texture coat. He's one of the lucky ones. But you do want to, talk to your groomer. So I would be okay with Woody doing even a longer cut if mom wanted to, just because I know his hair texture and I've worked with him long enough now that I know we could do a longer if mom wanted. Luckily, mom really likes the half inch, and it works very well with her, her style and or lifestyle and what she wants her pup to look like. And then it also works for the health of the dog, because we don't want dogs to be matted. I touched on this in my double coated dogs video, but the reason why we do not want matting in dogs is, think about if you have a tight ponytail and somebody's like pulling on it constantly, but it's all over your body. And that is what matting feels like. So it's uncomfortable. A lot of dogs will actually have personality changes when you shave off their matting, because they're like, oh, my skin can breathe again. I'm not in pain or have like these weird, uncomfortable spots on my body. It's really interesting to see. The other thing is matting can trap moisture and debris and dirt near the skin, and that can cause skin irritation. So it is very common if we do totally do a de-shed, or not de-shed, sorry, a de-mat, where we are taking all of the matting off the dog, doing a 10 blade all the way down to get this matting off. It is very common to see like red spots or red patches, especially if there was a very tight mat in that area. And then also sometimes there are like skin infections or irritations. I have not, and I'm in an area where like fleas and ticks aren't very common, but if you are in an area where that is common, your dog, there might be, fleas and ticks underneath the matting, and then your dog will have to go to the vet afterwards as well. So, the other thing too is if your dog's coat is tangle free and it can breathe, it temperature controls itself. So a lot of pet parents will be like, oh, I want to take my poodle shorter for the summer so it can be, cooler. You technically don't have to do that because as long as the coat is brushed out, it will regulate its own body temperature. You still can take it short for the summer though if you like that. That is totally fine in your personal choice, but you don't have to as long as it is properly maintained. So anyways, back to our good grooming routine. So as long as you're able to keep matting out, then you can go to a longer length. A good rule of thumb for these dogs is for every 1 inch of fur they have on their body, it should be about 1 hour of brushing a day. And I know that that is not feasible for most people, and that does sound like a lot of work. So generally, I do recommend 1 hour of brushing per inch every 3 to 4 days. As long as you are doing proper brushing techniques, which I will now insert our fun clip of me showing proper brushing techniques on Irulin. Hello and welcome back to our coat types. Sorry, have a little puppy jumping on me. This is our little puppy Irulin. So happy you all are very excited. You guys finally get to meet her. She is absolutely adorable and doing so good with learning about the grooming table. She just finished getting her grooms. That's why she's a little. All my girls actually finished getting their grooms, so they're all a little whiny and ready to go home. So we're gonna keep this quick, especially since we have a puppy. I will cut to the normal me in my house to talk about everything else, but I did want to do a brushing demo because that is so important on our curly hair types of dogs. So for our Irulin, she is a standard poodle, so obviously she has her clean face and her clean feet. And today we actually just for the first time introduced scissors. So we started to go around kind of the bottom of her, not her palms, but the bottom of her legs around her clean feet to clean it up. And then we have been giving her it's kind of hard to see, she has ponytails right above her eyes, so that it holds her top knot back as it's growing out so she can still see. Obviously still a puppy, so she is learning table manners and camera manners for that moment, or for that. And my girls are trying to figure her out as well. So anyways, brushing curly coated dogs. Don't fight your sister. So we want to go through with a slicker brush. This is a Chris Christensen, I believe it's the big K, or there's also the big G. The black one is for schnauzers and kind of like more wiry coated dogs. The pink one is designed specifically for poodles and doodles and these curly coated, kind of more luscious dogs. Johnny. So what we're going to do first is we're going to brush with our slicker brush, and then we are going to go through with our greyhound comb. This is my very well used. Both of the ends are, hit inside because I've dropped this so many times. Also, before I move on, these brushes, they are an investment piece. They're about $80 normal retail value. But if you look on Amazon and kind of have it in your cart, they frequently go on sale for usually $30 off. So you can find them usually for about $50-ish. And yes, that is a lot for a brush. But this brush, like I said, is designed specifically for doodles and poodles. It has longer bristles and they are really soft. So they do not really, a lot of dogs don't love the brushing. I guess here's a comparison. Sorry, this is our Pros brush that they use. So there's a comparison of the bristle size, and these ones are they're a lot harder and harsher. Where these ones, they're really soft and cushiony, and so a lot of dogs do a lot better with this brush. especially if they don't love brushing. So anyways, we will first go through with our slicker brush, and then we follow through with our greyhound comb to find any tangles. Rulin is already brushed out, so we will not find any tangles. But earlier, I did find a couple little tangles hidden in her top knot that the brush went over, but the greyhound comb catches. Sometimes the slicker brush will slide over knots, especially if they are small enough, and you won't feel it snag on the brush all the time. So we do like to follow through the greyhound comb in order to make sure we get all of the tangles out. So I will show you on kind of the side and back of her. So you want to do, it's a pat and pull method. So you pat and then you pull. And just like our human hair, we do not want to do one long brush. We want to do little brushes. They have fur all over. If you do one long brush, you're definitely going to miss knots. And the dog will not love it. So a little pat pull method. Going down her back. Awesome. And then we take our comb. And for our poodles and doodles, this comb has two sides. This side has finer tongs, or tines, I think is what they're called. And then this side has a little bit larger spaces. For the poodles and doodles, you do want the larger spaces unless they have like really thin hair. Most of them do not, but most of them are very luscious and full dogs. If you do the thinner side, you can get it through, but it is harder. Just gonna go through, make sure we can get it through fairly easily and that there are no snags. Sometimes if there is a thicker patch, you might come up and it is a little harder to get through, but just make sure that there's no knots and you are all good. So that is how we brush our lovely curly coated dogs. Thank you to our lovely Arulin for demoing, and hopefully as she gets a little bit better and better on her grooming table, you guys get to see just a little bit more of her. You are a sweetie, and we love you. So I'm glad you enjoyed our little segment with our puppy Rue and learning all about good brushing techniques. So again, my personal recommendation, because putting aside an hour brushing every single day for a pet in today's day and age, where our schedules are overloaded and crazy busy, is a lot to ask for. And again, most people that get, especially doodles, they don't exactly know what they're signing up for, because a lot of those breeders are backyard breeders, and not super responsible. And so they're trying to just, sell you a puppy essentially. And they don't tell you all the information you need to know and all the care for the dog. Unlike our ethical breeders, which we go over in our puppy video. But anyways, so brushing is the most effective way to get rid of matting. It's really the only way. So you want to do that for every inch of fur, an hour every about three days is what I generally say. And then that will keep the knots out of your dog. So for instance, if you have a 1/2 inch on your dog got cut in a 1/2 inch, then brush your dog for a 1/2 hour. And again, really focus on those high matting areas, especially maybe if you don't have as much time one night, on those high friction areas, focus your time, and then maybe like on your Saturday or Sunday night when you have a little bit more time, then do the entire dog. Just get a good routine going, and that will help your dog be mat free. And then you can take your dog as long as you want, as long as you have the time to brush it out at home. Now for the actual grooming routine, generally they are supposed to get in these curly coated dogs every 4 to 6 weeks for grooming for a full groom. And that is especially if you want them to maintain that super cute teddy bear face that most, of these owners do go for. Or if you do have a, breed standard cut, especially for those poodles, you probably want to get it in more often if you want it looking in tip-top shape. I know with the Rulin, I groomed her and I did her clean feet about a month ago, and I just groomed her this weekend and her clean feet were already growing out. So these coats, they do grow fast. They constantly grow. They don't shed. If you have a purebred, if you have a doodle, they do shed. Hate to break it to you. But the coats just keep growing and growing, so they do grow very fast. However, I know that right now in general, but right now our economy is kind of cooked. But in general, it is very hard financially to get a dog in for, you know, 100 to, sometimes if you go to a super bougie, you know, salon and you're getting a long cut and you have a big dog, sometimes it can be in the hundreds of dollars, like it can be 200 to 300. That is expensive, and most people don't have that type of money. So in general, I say do a bath, or a bath and a trim if you want, you know, the face to look a little nicer, every 3 to 4 weeks. And then do a full groom every 6 to 8 weeks. That way you're still getting your dog into your groomer. Generally, baths are a lot less expensive than a full groom. But it does need to be a bath and a brush, because if you introduce water to these dogs' coats, especially if they're blown out, the fur will curl. And if you have curly fur, it will mat easier. And the water and all the scrubbing that we do to wash your dog, it does like help essentially your coat tangle, kind of like when you wash your hair, right? When you're scrubbing your hair, you do have to condition it in general afterwards and then brush it once it's dried to get the tangles out. It's the exact same with these dogs' type of hair. So you do want it to be at least a bath and a brush in between your full grooms. Most of my clients, again, they don't do this, especially doodle clients, but they bring their dog in every 6 to 8 weeks, and then they'll get a shorter cut, like I said, or 5 blade or a 1/2 inch is at least my most common, and then a fuller teddy bear face. And that is totally fine too. Again, just talk to your groomer, but best case scenario, a groom every 4 to 6 weeks. If that's not possible, then the next step up would be a bath every 3 to 4 weeks, and then a haircut every 6 to 8 weeks. Very important they do get a haircut though, at least every 6 to 8 weeks. Unless you are like super on top of brushing at home and you're like growing their coat out to a ridiculous length, I guess. But it is also good to at least get a trim so that your dog can see still. But yes, the other thing too is nails, which we'll go over in one of next month's videos. You do want to get them in for nails about every 3 to 4 weeks. And that will help keep their nails nice and short and make it less so that they get, you know, different problems in their legs and paws later on in life. So you can pair your bath up, and generally full baths come with a nail trim, so you can pair those two up with these dogs. I think that's it for their good grooming routine. We talked about brushing at home. Oh, the other thing too, if you and brushing at home is too hard, but you do want your dog to be grown out longer, most salons, including the one I work at, they offer walk-in brushing services, and you can always call or ask your salon if they offer this. Essentially what that means is you can either make a walk-in appointment, or you can just walk into the salon and they will brush your dog out for you. If that is what you are opting for instead of brushing at home, if you have a very long coated dog, and what I mean by that is it is like, you know, 1.5 inches or more, I would suggest doing it weekly. If it is about 1 inch to, 2 inches, you can get by with doing it every 2 weeks in general. And the reason why that is a longer length than brushing at home is because groomers have different tools and techniques to get small mats out. And if we catch them earlier on, we have a higher chance of not shaving the area of that dog or spot shaving. And so it is good if we catch them earlier, because then we do have the tools and the techniques to get smaller mats out. Obviously, if it's a giant mat behind, the ear of your dog, or it's all the way down to the skin, that is more difficult, which is why if brushing at home is too difficult, you do want to get them in a little bit more frequently. But yeah, so I think that is it then. Next month, we will be talking about nails. And then I haven't decided the other video. I don't think we're going to do our next coat type. I think we will save that for a couple months down the road. I have covered now, though, the 2 most common coat types that at least I see in my salon, which are curly coats and then our double coats. So it is a good start to our pet parent education segments. Yeah, and so next week we will cover nails because that is very important. And then we might do like teeth brushing too. We'll keep it a little more simple. Yeah, or we'll pick one of my favorite pet products that I use and go over that. We will see what I'm feeling, I guess, when the time comes. But yeah, until then, stay safe. Tell your dogs I said hello and give them lots of puppy kisses for me. Bye bye.